Hello guys, and welcome to another video looking at some WARCRY. Today we're going to have a look at deployment, and specifically at the three groups you can place your fighters in, so dagger, shield and hammer. How often it happens that each of them is on the battlefield first or second or in the third battle round, and then we'll talk about why or some of the reasons why you would want to stick more fighters in one group or maybe in the other, and so on. So let's get started here. First off, on this sheet, I took the liberty to basically I split all the deployment cards up into the balanced ones and the other ones, so that the unbalanced ones. And then I took a look at on how many deployment cards each of the battle groups comes on turn 1, turn 2 or turn 3. So for the balanced ones you can see that the shield is basically always on turn 1 and a couple of times turn 2. So you can be very sure that your fighters are going to be on if they are in the shield. So this is what, in like a competitive environment, you would be pretty sure that your shield fighters are mostly on the table from turn 1. Dagger and hammer, they look very similar. Dagger slightly better, slightly more on turn 1 than on turn 2, but in general very close. So yeah, probably slightly favoring the dagger here. Other than that, yeah, you can see it's very unlikely for battle groups to come in on turn 3, but it does happen on turn 2 a lot for the dagger and the hammer. So this is for the more tournament-focused play. If you're going to be playing normally, you'll probably take all the cards, and that's going to include the quote-unquote other cards, so the non-balanced ones. And there we have there you can see that the shield again is mostly on from turn 1, so again having the shield, if fighters in your shield means they will be normally on the battlefield. Now, very interesting to me is this, the dagger and the hammer are quite significantly different here. There's a lot of scenarios in which the hammer comes on turn 5 and still a lot where they come on, turn 3, and still a lot where they come on turn 2. For the dagger it looks a lot better. There's only one scenario where one of the two dagger groups comes in on turn 3. So if you see the 0.5s here, that's because in the non-balanced scenarios, one player doesn't always get the same result as the other. So, for example, it might be that one player's daggers comes in on turn 3 and the other player's dagger comes in on turn 2. And then I would split this in 0.5. So 0.5 here and 0.5 there. That's why we've got some of the 0.5 values here. But in general, you can see that in the non-balanced deployment, again, the shield is the one to be most likely on board first, but then dagger is definitely a lot better than the hammer. And then I've just compiled this, so if you're playing all the cards, you can see again, in most of the cards, you'll have the shield on first, and dagger is kind of basically 2/3 on in the first turn, and in 1/3 of your games you'll have them on second turn, while the hammer is basically almost evenly split between first and second turn, with a not insignificant part on third turn. So yeah, that's that. Now what does that mean? Well, it would certainly mean that if you want to have a fighter on the field, definitely early on you would definitely want to put them in the shield or in the dagger. The hammer is really the one you want to put your least important fighters in, or maybe even your fastest fighters, because if a fighter comes in on turn 3, you want them to be able to be very quick to make it to the battlefield quickly and not like waste another full turn just walking. Now, how can we approach building our groups? There's a couple of different approaches for our battle groups, and I'll talk through them. So the first one is risk minimizing. Um, the second is aura maximizing, and the third is movement optimization. Those are the three basic approaches I'm going to talk about in a second. Don't worry, it's not going to take very long. So let's just jump right into it. The first one is risk minimizing. So what does that mean? Well, obviously, placing a lot of your guys in one battle group is going to mean that there's a high likelihood, or not a high likelihood, but there is the possibility of all of them only coming in turn 3. So for example, if I place all my fighters in my hammer group, or a big chunk of my fighters in my hammer group, and that hammer group comes in turn 3, I'm basically not getting any value out of these guys. So not having too many guys in one group is certainly good, but if you're intending to do that, make sure they are in the shield group, because then you're most likely to have them from turn 1. Then we've got no super weak battle group. I think that's important because there is objectives, and there's equally many objectives for killing the shield, the hammer, and the dagger. So if I stack a load of fighters in the shield, and the objective, the victory condition, is killing the opponent hammer, and then I only have one fighter in my hammer group, I'm going to make it very easy for my opponent to kill my own hammer. So in terms of minimizing my risk, I would not want to have too many fighters in one group. I would have to make sure that at least one strong fighter is in each of the battle groups, so they can't be taken out too easily. And then stacking models in shield and dagger. So obviously, as I said, the hammer is the most likely to come on late. So if I want to make sure that most of my models are on the pitch turn 1, I would like to focus most of my good models in shield and dagger and only have a few in the hammer. So that's risk minimizing. Then we've got aura maximizing. And this is very important for some battle groups, for some warbands, sorry, and not important at all for others. I'm just going to give a couple of examples for where it is important, and you'll know if you're playing a warband. For example, the greenskins, the iron jaws, they really depend on the war. They are very slow, but the war can make them incredibly quick. But it depends on most of your fighters being around your leader. So it only is a 6-inch aura. So deploying most of your fighters in the same battle group will allow you to really get your benefits out of war. So for Iron Jaws, for example, I would recommend placing most of your fighters in your shield group together with your leader. Then we've got other things like Van Hel's Danse Macabre, that's for Legions of Nagash. That's also very potent quad ability that can really change the battle. Again, that's one where you probably like to have multiple fighters with your necromancer in the same group. And then, for example, there's High Tide for Island of Deepkin, which gives attacks to all surrounding friendly units. And there's similar abilities for many battle groups. So many warbands have like a 6-inch aura that buffs their fighters. Now, it's not quite as important for example, for Iden of Deepkin, because if you have the eel as a leader who can move 10 inches, he can get to where you want him to be, can get next to another battle group and give them the buff as well if you want to. So it's not quite as important for those guys. Very important for the slow movement guys though. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then we've got the last one, which is movement optimization. Now, oops, okay, I didn't animate this one, I'm sorry, but anyways, you'll have to deal with all the bullet points in one go. So first off, we've got better models spread via more groups. So obviously, if I have all my guys in one group and it happens to come on in one of the corner of the board, that means that they might have to walk a very long way until they actually get to be useful. So again, splitting your guys into the groups evenly will allow you to have a higher likelihood of getting where you need to be. Then I would recommend having fast movers in every group, especially in your hammer group, which you expect to come on last. So and probably in the dagger as well, because the dagger is often coming on in turn 2. So having fast movers in those groups will allow you to get to the action probably around the center of the board, oftentimes rather quickly, and not having to waste a full turn just walking up there. And then movement abilities in the biggest groups. That's what I basically said with the war as well. If I stack my fighters in one group, I need to have a fighter which like buffs the movement of all of the guys around him. That's true for Nurgle Mortals, for example, who need the Bell guy who gives them extra movement, and it's true for the Iron Jaws and so on. Yeah, so that's really all I have to say. I didn't want to make this unnecessarily long. I hope I gave you a good idea of what you might have to keep in mind for building your groups. Now, one thing I could do is basically from my warband lists, make a video where I recommend how to split up the fighters in each of the warbands. If you would like to see that, please do let me know. I haven't planned doing it yet, so I would only do that if you guys ask for it. But if you guys are interested in seeing how I would split up for each warband in particular, please do let me know. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.